The iPhone 14 Pro Max has had some pretty mixed reviews in terms of battery life. In all fairness, it does have a slightly smaller battery when compared to its predecessor, the 13 Pro Max, but in turn it does have a much more efficient 4nm run A16 Bionic chipset. So today we're going to be putting it to the test against its predecessor, the 13 Pro Max, as well as 5 of the best Android flagships to date in this 100 to 0% battery life drain test. All phones have been set to the exact same brightness level using a LUX Meter. All devices have been updated to their latest available software updates. All of them are indeed SIM-free and will only be connected via Wi-Fi. All of them are rocking a 120Hz LTPO display, and all of them have been set to their native resolution. Will the iPhone 14 Pro Max crash and burn, or will it succeed and remain crowned king? This is TechNick, and without further ado, let's find out. All phones are currently sitting at 100% thanks to them all being plugged in charged for a couple hours before the test, and all of them have been sitting in a nice cool air-conditioned environment, sitting at around 16 degrees Celsius. We are sitting at around a room temperature of 21.3 degrees in Celsius. Obviously the room and AC itself does differ a little bit. And recording the temperature of all devices, they're all sitting at around 31 degrees in Celsius, but they're all currently plugged in charge. Usually when phones are plugged in charge, they are a little bit hotter than when they're unplugged, like we're doing right now. Unplugging them and hitting that start timer phone on the right-hand side, getting the test underway right now. Just to let you guys know, we have 100% on all of them, and that battery percentage is tied in directly with the timer interval at the top right-hand corner. And if you guys are a bit rusty on specs, we do have the specs at the bottom of all the devices over here at the bottom of the screen. And we also have the time interval hitting 30 minutes right now, 100% on the iPhone 14 Pro Max, 96% on the 13 Pro Max, 96% on the S22 Ultra, 99% on the Xiaomi 12S Ultra, 100% still on the 12 Pro, 100% on the OPPO, and 100% on the OnePlus 10 Pro. Just to let you guys know, we also have the interval and peak temperatures over there, also in relation to that time interval on the right hand side, which is tied into the percentage above it in terms of battery level. Get into that 1 hour mark interval. We have 96% on the 14 Pro Max, 92% on the 13 Pro Max, 91% on the S22 Ultra, 93% on the Xiaomi 12S Ultra, 95% on the Xiaomi 12 Pro, 94% on the OPPO Find X5 Pro, and 95% on the OnePlus 10 Pro. So far, the OPPO is the hottest over here in terms of interval and peak, and the iPhone 14 Pro Max is the coolest in terms of interval and peak. In terms of battery capacity, the 3 largest capacities sit at 5,000 milliamps, that being the Samsung Galaxy S22 Ultra, OPPO Find X5 Pro, and the OnePlus 10 Pro. Just behind that is the Xiaomi 12S Ultra, slightly smaller than 5,000 at 4,860 milliamp hours. Below that is this little brother, the Xiaomi 12 Pro at 4,600 milliamp hours, and then the iPhone 13 Pro Max is second smallest, that being 4,352 milliamp hours, which is just 29 milliamp hours larger than its successor, the 14 Pro Max, sitting at 4,323 milliamp hours. So we were hoping to see an increase in battery capacity. We actually got 29 milliamps less, not much of a difference. Nevertheless, we still got less battery capacity, though we do have a more impressive, more efficient 4nm run A16 Bionic chipset, as opposed to last year's 13 Pro Max's A15 Bionic run on 5nm architecture. All of the other devices here, all of the Android devices here, are also sitting at 4nm, though the Xiaomi 12S Ultra is a little bit more special than the others, the other Android phones that is, because it's running the new Snapdragon 8 Plus Gen 1 chipset. The other Android devices are all rocking the Snapdragon 8 Gen 1 chipset, also of course running on 4nm process node technology. After 2.5 hours, we have 81% on the iPhone 14 Pro Max, 78% on the iPhone 13 Pro Max, which is 3% behind its successor. 3% behind that is the S22 Ultra, 3% behind that is the Xiaomi 12S Ultra, 3% behind that is the Xiaomi 12 Pro, and above that by around 7% is the OPPO Find X5 Pro with 76%, and matching that is the OnePlus 10 Pro with 76%. We're currently on Instagram right now, looping a reel. Changed it up a little bit this time, but it is still very much the same as my previous videos. We'll get back to that in a second, but just to let you guys know, the iPhones both drained by around 8% after Instagram. Instagram does not seem to be very well optimized for iOS, at least iOS 16 that is. All the Android phones kind of dipped by around 4 to 5% after Instagram, not as much as the iPhones, but that's pretty much the only app, since all other apps on this test, the iPhones tend to hold their own quite well and the Androids tend to drain a lot more for all other apps. It's just Instagram when it comes to the iPhones, just to let you guys know. So back to my tests. You can compare this video, this battery drain test, to all other battery drain tests on my channel. I keep all the apps the same, the runtime for all the apps exactly the same, the brightness levels on all devices exactly the same. It is all exactly the same, but you cannot compare the results of this test and all these phones on this test to other channels since they use different apps and different brightness levels, so on and so forth. But be welcome to go through all my drain tests, and I would encourage you to, because there are so many of them and they're all awesome, and there are so many phones that have done so great in my battery life drain test. 4-hour mark interval over here, 65% on the iPhone 14 Pro Max, 62% on the iPhone 13 Pro Max, still just a 3% difference between the two over there, 63% on the S22 Ultra, now beating the 13 Pro Max, interesting one over there, 59% on the Xiaomi 12S Ultra, 54% on the Xiaomi 12 Pro, which is 5% below its bigger brother, the 12S Ultra, probably because of that new chipset, and its battery capacity is slightly above that. But 60% on the OPPO Find X5 Pro, well, 48% now after 4 hours and 30 minutes, 58%, 10% ahead of that is the OnePlus 10 Pro, 45% on the Xiaomi 12 Pro, 52 on the Xiaomi 12S Ultra, 54 on the Samsung Galaxy S22 Ultra, which is now 1% below the 13 Pro Max. It was the other way around the last interval, and 58% still leading the pack is the 14 Pro Max. We're busy recording main video over here, 4K 30 FPS, and before that we did selfie video, and that was capped at 1080p 30 FPS. Now I know a lot of the phones can do selfie video up to 4K or even 60 FPS and can do back video at 4K 60 FPS, but like I mentioned earlier, I like to keep things the same so that you can compare this test and the results in this test to all my other battery life drain tests on my channel. So I kept them exactly the same as all of those, since a couple years ago phones were capped at 1080p 30 FPS using the selfie cam. Some of them are still capped at that for the selfie cam. Most of them can still do 4K 60 when it comes to back video recording, but I want to keep it the same. So 4K 30 for the back. Now we are on benchmarks right now, and I do an hour of benchmarks. So we just did Antutu, and we also did 3D Mark Wildlife stress test. And this is not because I'm trying to drain the phones fast, but it's because they actually simulate high performance games. 3D Mark Wildlife actually says it in the description before you hit into the app before you start the test. It says this simulates high performing gaming. So I don't have 7 people here to play 7 different games on 7 different phones, so it just makes life a little bit easier. One thing to mention though is that both Xiaomi devices, or all Xiaomi devices, always overheat when it comes to benchmark testing. And the OPPO and OnePlus devices, as of recent years, also overheat, but the Xiaomis at least give you a warning. The OPPO and OnePlus just kick you out the app, close all background apps, kick you to the home screen, almost like a soft reset. After 6 hours and 12 minutes, the Xiaomi 12 Pro says cheers to us. It's done. It's not terrible battery life. I consider 5 hours good. 6 hours, above 6 hours is great. Above 7 hours is fantastic. And above 8 hours is outright insane. So it's good to see the Xiaomi doing okay. Yeah, 6 hours and 12 minutes is not too bad with a 12.366 milliamp hour per minute battery life drain rate. The OPPO Find X5 Pro not far behind that, finishing off in 6 hours and 23 minutes. So just 11 minutes longer lasting than the Xiaomi, and it has a 400 milliamp hour advantage in terms of its battery capacity, much larger battery capacity here. But it does have a worse milliamp hour per minute drain of 13.055 since it has a bigger battery. Now moving on to the 6 hour 30 minute mark interval, we have 24% on the iPhone 14 Pro Max. Just 1% behind that now is the 13 Pro Max, even though it has 96% battery health, whereas the new iPhone 14 Pro Max has 100% battery health because I just got the device. 18% on the Samsung, now 12% on the Samsung after 7 hours. We have 90% on the 13 Pro Max, 20% just beating the 13 Pro Max by 1%, 20% on the iPhone 14 Pro Max, 4% left on the Xiaomi 12S Ultra, and 7% on the OnePlus 10 Pro. And after 7 odd hours, I'm actually pretty impressed that all of these devices have made it past the 7 hour mark interval. That is superb in terms of battery life. Any of these phones that you see alive right now are doing a bang up job in terms of battery life. Xiaomi 12S Ultra knocks off at 7 hours and 24 minutes. Now that is actually a really good thing for Xiaomi, because Xiaomis don't necessarily have the best track record in terms of battery life, especially on my channel with battery life drain tests. They tend to die below 6 hours. So it's good to see Xiaomi on the right track here. Hopefully things improve going forward as well. And then the OnePlus 10 Pro finished not far behind that, 7 hours and 26 minutes. And the Samsung not far behind that, 7 hours and 27 minutes. So not a big difference between the Xiaomi 12S Ultra, the OnePlus 10 Pro, and the Samsung Galaxy S22 Ultra. The only two phones left here are the iPhones. After 7.5 hours, we have 14% and 13% respectively on the iPhone 14 with 14%, 13% on the iPhone 13 Pro Max. A little bit weird over there. Anyway, we're restarting the test here, Google Chrome scrolling, and we're getting to that 8 hour mark interval. Last time I tested the 13 Pro Max, it ended at 8 hours. It still has 2% left in the tank after 8 hours, 8% left in the tank of the 14 Pro Max after 8 hours as well. And let's see which one is gonna make it to the end. So far, it looks like the 14 Pro Max is gonna take the crown here, and it does, since the 13 Pro Max knocks out at 8 hours and 13 minutes, which is actually 13 minutes improved over the last time I tested it out around 2 months ago. But it is quite significantly down from the first time I tested it about a year ago, which got 9.5 hours with 100% battery health. More on that at the end of the test, so stay tuned because it's really interesting to see how 100% battery health on the 14 Pro Max compares to the 13 Pro Max with 100% battery health. And the 14 Pro Max just died 8 hours and 30 minutes on the nose. It finished off and it did stay pretty cool, but the 13 Pro Max stayed cooler, which is fantastic. But the 14 Pro Max did indeed have the lowest milliamp hour per minute drain. 7th place over here, we have the Xiaomi 12 Pro, 6 hours and 12 minutes with a 4600 milliamp hour battery. Not too bad for one of the smaller batteries over here in this test. In terms of 6th place, we have the OPPO Find X5 Pro, slightly disappointing since last time out it did it in almost 8 hours. 6 hours and 23 minutes nonetheless with a 5000 milliamp hour battery. Not terrible, but I would expect more. When it comes to the Xiaomi 12S Ultra, it placed 5th. 7 hours and 24 minutes is fantastic battery life. 4th place is the OnePlus 10 Pro, beating the Xiaomi with a slightly larger battery, that being 5000 milliamps, doing it in 7 hours and 26 minutes, beating the Xiaomi by just 2 minutes. Beating the OnePlus by 1 minute is the Samsung Galaxy S22 Ultra, 7 hours and 27 minutes, same size battery life as the OnePlus at 5000 milliamp hours. Now the smallest batteries of this test are the iPhone. 2nd place, the iPhone 13 Pro Max, slightly larger battery than its successor, but still 8 hours and 13 minutes. And 1st place, the new crowned king, iPhone 14 Pro Max, doing it in 8 hours and 30 minutes with the smallest battery of the lot here, 4323 milliamp hours. Now, when it comes to temperature, the hottest phone here in terms of peak was the OPPO Find X5 Pro with a whopping 65 degrees in Celsius. The hottest in terms of end temp was the Xiaomi 12 Pro, and the coolest in terms of end temp, ironically, is its bigger brother, the Xiaomi 12S Ultra, probably due to the new Snapdragon 8 Plus Gen 1 chipset, which is slightly more efficient. And the coolest peak here was oddly the iPhone 13 Pro Max and not the 14 Pro Max. Now, if you take a look at the top of the screen, you'll notice that I have there for all the devices except the 14 Pro Max, the first time I tested this phone in a battery life drain test on my channel. Obviously, I haven't tested the 14 Pro Max, but I did test the 13 Pro Max around a year ago. The first time it entered into my battery life drain test battle, and it got 9 hours and 30 minutes. This test is the first time the iPhone 14 Pro Max entered into my battery life drain test, which I've kept exactly the same. No differences between the test a year ago and today. And it got 8 hours and 30 minutes. So if you want to compare apples to apples, then you could say that the 13 Pro Max, the 14 Pro Max's predecessor, actually outdid its bigger brother by an hour. But the iPhone 13 Pro Max now has 96% battery health, and it's still got 8 hours and 13 minutes, leaving all the other Android devices in the dust. Now, if you take a look right at the bottom of the screen, you'll notice that I have 5000 milliamp hours on all devices based on their milliamp hour per minute reading, where if they all had the same size battery, so at 5000 milliamp hours, all their times would naturally adjust except for the ones that are actually 5000 milliamp hour cells sitting inside those devices. So the iPhone would then bump up to 9 hours and 50 minutes, the iPhone 14 Pro Max that is. So almost 10 hours. Now the crazy thing is that I have gotten about 10 hours on an iPhone on my channel in this exact same test before in the past. Make sure to siphon through my other battery drain tests to see which one got almost 10 hours or over 10 hours that is. This has one of the largest batteries in iPhone history, and it did not do as well as previous iPhones have done, which is a bit of a bummer. But if it did have a 5000 milliamp hour cell, it would hit almost 10 hours, and that would be fantastic. And about 2 months ago, my last battery drain test, I was saying that I can't wait to see the new iPhone 14 Pro Max because it will probably or hopefully have a larger battery, and it actually has a smaller battery by 29 milliamp hours. That's besides the point. I hope that you guys enjoyed watching this video as much as I did making it, and you actually learned a thing or two as well. I really am pretty impressed with the new 14 Pro Max's battery life, but I could have been more impressed. This is TechNick, and I'll catch you in the next one.